Please welcome, am I going to do this right? Dan Podsedly. I did it. From Pivotal Tracker, everybody. Dan, all the way from Chicago to be with us, by the way.
Thank you, Suzanne. That's quite the intro.
Would you like a seat?
I will sit.
Okay. Do we have any Pivotal Tracker customers here in the audience tonight? Can I get a show of hands?
Woohoo.
All right.
You used to be. I want to talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, save it for the Q&A.
No, really, I do.
Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
The word on the street is that they call you Mr. Pivotal Tracker.
I'm not sure what street that's on. It's actually...
It's the street.
No, it's Father Tracker, or the father of Tracker, which is actually incorrect, because I wasn't there when it was born. I was there when it was born and then neglected. I rescued it, I nurtured it, right? So therefore I'm more a godfather, a stepfather. So that would be the better way to represent my role.
So we'll call you Godfather for the rest of the
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great. Maybe we can just start by taking a minute and helping us to understand all the layers to the Pivotal empire, right? Because there's Pivotal Labs and there's Pivotal Tracker.
It's the first time I've heard it referred to as an empire, but we'll take that. I'm a godfather. I am from the Pivotal empire. I'm not sure that those go together well, but I'll take it. So who here has heard of Pivotal beyond or outside of Pivotal Tracker? So yeah, it's what our company is is a bit of a mouthful now. We started as a little consultancy in San Francisco. We were building products for and with startups, right? That's kind of where Tracker began. So that was Pivotal Labs, right? And we were very much into not just building something, but teaching how to do it. And our sort of method to the madness was very deeply rooted in extreme programming as a thing, as a methodology, right? So small teams, pair programming, test-driven development, like the whole thing, like cross-functional teams before they were called cross-functional teams. So that was just something that made sense to us. We built Pivotal Labs out of that. We grew because of word of mouth, because like we got positive reaction. Our customers were happy. They told their customers. VC started sending, their portfolio companies to us to eliminate the technical risk and to really teach how to fish. So we built that. That's Pivotal Labs. So that's still part of Pivotal, except it's now, I want to say, in like 12, 15, maybe more offices around the world, including here in LA, in Santa Monica. We also have a pretty big product called the Pivotal Cloud Foundry. It's a PaaS, right? So it's an application sort of layer that sits on top of like Amazon, right? Google Cloud Platform, Azure. You can run it internally on VMware, right? So that just makes it really easy to deploy, scale, manage apps. Like you can literally deploy a Rails app in like 30 seconds without doing anything. And you can move between Amazon and Google and Azure. So you don't have that infrastructure lock-in. So that's a big piece of that. We have Tracker. We're a fairly small piece. We've been sort of like, we're like a little island, right? Most of our team's in Denver. We operate more like a fully functional startup within this larger organization. But then Pivotal, I think, has some other things like some data products. I might be missing something, but that's Pivotal in a nutshell, right? We're a few thousand people now, but our roots are very much still with the startup community. And although we work with a lot of enterprise customers now, like what we're really bringing to them is, it's like leveling the field. Every bigger company is under disruptive threat, right? There's an Uber for whatever in your industry, for your industry. And so, they realize that. So they're coming to us to learn how to be like a startup, how to operate more efficiently, how to do continuous delivery and actually ship like on a regular basis, how to form teams, how to just execute, right? And so that's sort of our, that's us in a very long nutshell, or a large nutshell, I guess.
A long, large nutshell. What is Pivotal Tracker actually as a software? Jim spoke a little bit about wanting to keep the boundary away from project management. How would you describe what your product is exactly?
Sure. So generally speaking, in terms of categories, I guess we're a project management tool, but that sounds really boring, right? And when people ask us like, oh, we're just a project management tool. No, we're not, right? We're a focused precision execution tool, right? That's what we are. We are, right? Like it's like this very specific thing. Put together a small team, right? Like a cross-functional team, obviously product manager, right? a certain number of engineers, not too few, not too many, right? Throw in UX, throw in data science, right? Maybe an exploratory tester. We're like, okay, now you have a team, right? So Tracker is where the backlog, the single backlog, lives for that team. It's the thing that gives them their mission, right? It's very visible. The product is very optimized for visibility, right? So you look at Tracker, you're always on the same page. Everything is right there. This is your backlog. This is who's working on it. We are collectively pulling from that backlog rather than having a manager assign tasks to engineer and then like asking where's your task and how many hours remaining. Like it's just a crisp, clean, focused backlog optimized for collaboration as or by a cross-functional small team, right, with a single mission or clear milestones.
First of all, the Development Factory is a longtime customer of Pivotal Tracker. We love
you.
them. So the other thing you might not know is that in my class, when I'm introducing to up-and-coming product managers this concept of problem-solution fit, I always include Pivotal Tracker among the slides. And I'm curious to hear kind of your definition of what is the problem and why did a solution like Pivotal Tracker need to come about in order to solve it specifically?
So I could maybe revise history a little bit and make it sound like 10 years ago we were doing this thing they call like lean product management with problem framing and validation and market fit and all that stuff that of course you would do today if you're starting a new product, right? But for us it was more about solving an internal need, a very specific one, right? We needed something very tactile, very visible. I mean, at the time Trello wasn't around, right? Jira was pretty early days. Like there really wasn't, the space of project management was very different, right? Clunky, heavy, hard to use. Like where is stuff? You gotta, everybody's got like a different view, right? In that tool. We just wanted something that was as crisp as having just a list of cards on a wall right there, very visible, very radiant, very tactile, right? And canonical, right? Like this drives the team. People see it, it's visible, it's around them, you're working on a story, but because out of the corner of your eye, you can see what's coming up, right? You're getting close to that release, right? To that milestone, right?
No.
Like this, sorry?
No, you're never getting
well, no,
close.
you're right, never. But at least you can see it, right? So we wanted to sort of represent that kind of very visible, tactile thing, but like obviously on a computer because sometimes the cleaners would come and like mess up the cards or like somebody was working from home. So just really taking that, making that, come to life as a piece of software that we could all use that would drive our work, that would make it visible, and that wouldn't require a lot of hunting for like, all the stuff that is typically stored somewhere in a project management tool. Also, we had to learn how to write Rails apps, Ruby on Rails, because people were starting to pay us to build Rails apps for them, and we didn't really know much about Rails. So it's like we built it for the sake of the learning experience of the technology. We built it because we needed it on our projects, and then it started to sort of feed itself, right? Like we had sort of the first iteration of Tracker in Tracker, right? Sort of driving its own evolution as a project.
Yeah, and it's interesting. This is a common way that product managers can end up with jobs because they suddenly realize, oh, I've been left to babysit this little pet project that we've created. Can you talk a little bit about the journey from kind of an ad hoc internal tool that somebody had to look after into pointing it out toward a market and managing it as a customer-facing product?
Sure, and that was a few years of my existence, right? And I'm sure many of you have been around in the consulting company where you're essentially selling your hours, your services, right? You're all about billable time and utilization, and many consultancies also develop products in a similar way, right? Like you have a need, you solve for it yourself, you build something, and then you start getting into this like, well, that's interesting. We kind of have like a thing that could be a product, but you have to think about it differently because you're so optimized for thinking about those billable hours, right? So you throw like your beach resources at it, not resources, people, right? Like somebody in between projects, go work on Tracker, right? And that's what our tool was for a long time. And it was a side thing for me too, right? I was, out there working on these client engagements, whether it was in our Pivotal offices or at some of the bigger companies at the time. And then Tracker was my little baby side thing that I started to care about deeply, right? And that's why I kind of kept sticking with it. Like nobody was actually telling me like, you need to PM that on the side. First of all, I was an engineer, right? I knew nothing about product management. Like what does that actually mean? Oh, it means you drag some stories around in the backlog and then like these engineers will like do things if you just move something up. Like, that's awesome. But I started to get kind of giddy with that. It's like, what if I just prioritize? And like, literally, that was me. Like, well, it would be really cool if Tracker could do X, right? So I'm just going to add a story for it. And so we did it. And the button should be blue and it should be on the left, right? It's like completely wrong, right? And so, but it started to get interesting. And as we started to get this sort of organic traction around it, because our customers, would sort of get hooked on it, even though it was like super simple, but there was something addicting about it, right? Like it drove people to behave a certain way. It had a sort of a gaming or gamification aspect to it that wasn't necessarily intentional. Like, things turning green as you get your stories accepted and your velocity, going up. Like these started to motivate. And so people wanted to stick with it. And so that, like, I started to understand the satisfaction that you get from being a product manager and seeing something that is sort of like yours, right? Like whether it's your real baby or, it's just your job to sort of take care of this thing, right? Like you get attached to it and then you start to really feed off the positive feedback and like you seeing more people use it and you're like, oh, it's actually solving their problems. It's making their days better, right? Like that's really satisfying, which is what then motivated me to gradually become more of a full-time, or my role started to be more full-time. Traction grew, my interest just from that experience grew, right? And then obviously now we start to think about, well, maybe we should make some money with this because it's a disservice to provide a tool, even though it was still just a free tool, right? A lot of people around the world were using it at that point, right? Because we just sort of opened it up. Like we made it really hard to like sign up and everything you have to sort of figure out. There's no onboarding, there's no help, nothing. But people started to use it because of this word of mouth thing. And so clearly at some point we're like, okay, we can't just keep having people on this, but if we don't keep people on this, like all those companies out there that have started to rely on our product, like as a daily, almost like a mission critical tool, right? Like we had some outages because it was we were starving the support for it. So there were some outages. And when outages start to happen, now Twitter was already around, right? So people started to bitch on Twitter and like, it was embarrassing. And so we were almost like dragged into like doing the right thing and saying, okay, maybe if we turn this into a product, and this is just me kind of doing it on my own with no support from the rest of like Pivotal, I just have to figure everything out. Well, what does it mean to be a product? Oh, well, you make money, right? So how do you make money with a SaaS product? What do you need to do? What is a merchant account, by the way? Gateways. Now we need like proper onboarding and credit card and PCI compliance, like just all this stuff, right? So I just kind of figured it out. And again, it was continually driven by more and more people using it, more positive feedback, and more just desire to do more for them and to be a tool that can help thousands of teams and companies around the world, right? So just became a natural transition for me.
Did you lose customers when you turned on the paywall?
Good question. I think thinking back, we lost about 20% of our active customers, right? Which, and we had no idea what to expect. Like we were sitting there when we first turned on pricing, we were like watching Twitter, going, oh my God, what's gonna happen, right? And interestingly, right, most of the feedback that started coming in, I mean, there's a bit like, wow, why is it so expensive for this many projects or whatever, right? But most of it was like, finally, they're gonna like treat it like a real product and we can start relying on it. And finally, like, I don't have to like hide the fact that we're using it at our company because now we're gonna pay for it. Now it's like a real thing and now it's gonna get the support that it needs, right? So the feedback was overwhelmingly positive and like we only lost 20%, which at the time we thought was a pretty good, or pretty small, loss, all things considered.
Yeah, it's an interesting parallel to the story that Jim was sharing. So they had this kind of very scientific reverse engineering process. You had, as you described, the much more scrappy. We didn't sort of know. We were figuring it out on the fly. But in both cases, I think a great testament to if you create a product that has true value, you can transact value through retention, through revenue, through referral.
Yes, it may actually succeed despite your best efforts to to stop it.
Just on the topic of execution, right? Because, project management, process management is about execution. That's what you're about. What do you think makes a great development team?
Yeah, and I think we've learned a lot about this over the years, right? And I think we just always had a fundamental sort of belief that there is power in a small team, first of all, right? So when you talk about teams, right, like I think there are some pretty clear situations of what is a team and what isn't a team, right? So to me, and even beyond the numbers, like obviously 30 people, like to me, that's not a team. Although I take that back. You can be a team, but at the execution level, right? You can't all be sort of focused on one thing. One product manager can't product manage with a group of 30 engineers, for example, right? So for me, a good software execution team is a PM, obviously. So in our world, like everything's pairing, right? We don't even count people in ones, at least engineers, which is kind of weird, right? Like I don't see two of you, I see one pair. So we count pairs. We have, so a proper team, as far as I'm concerned, is one PM, 2 to 3 pairs of engineers, right? A UX person, right? And then maybe some of the roles, right, like that help with some of the research or maybe testing, right? But they're embedded, and it's no larger than, I would say, 8 to 10 people max, right? That's a beautiful thing. That's a beautifully executing team, as long as their priorities are clear, right? And I think what we prefer over, like, you know, even though it is possible to take a person or team of 10 people and like start sort of on a daily basis, like assigning, you know, tasks or issues or whatever to individual people, right? Like that's hard, that's messy. So instead, it's like have your priorities clear, own everything collectively, the code base, right? Anybody can take the next story, issue, whatever you call it, and just work together to see it through. So this team is inclined to work together. There are no heroes. There are no individual contributors that stand out above the rest, right? That's a poison atmosphere, right? So we are all in it together. We're one team. We sometimes play together, right? Maybe we go drink together once in a while, right? We're bonded. We have empathy for one another, right? But then it's like going back to what the PM does, right? And our priorities are clear. We understand the vision, the big picture, but we also understand like what is the next, 3 things tactically, right? We celebrate our wins together, right? All that. Now I can keep going, but that to me is like perfect. And then you scale up organizations with these, sort of individual small cross-functional teams.
Do you have an official title at Pivotal?
Do I or do people?
You.
Yeah, it's been kind of very fuzzy, right? I was a general manager. Now I'm the VP, Pivotal Tracker, which is like, okay, I'm the VP for the Pivotal Tracker.
Yeah, it's very mysterious.
But yeah, I mean, it's my role has been partly product, right? Where I am sort of still acting as a head of product, and we have multiple PMs and designers. So we have, I think, 3 PMs, 3.5, because one of them is like an engineering director that also wears the PM hat for some of the kind of infrastructure and DevOps pieces. And then we have three UX designers, and so I manage them, but then I also manage the guy who manages all the engineering, and then I also manage a support team, so I still kind of try to keep my hands across everything, so therefore my title's always kind of fuzzy and broad.
Any questions for Dan, VP, Pivotal Tracker? Says he's all the way from Chicago. This is an amazing opportunity. Any
I might
questions?
be staying here forever because it's so nice here, so you might have me here for a while.
Yeah. Come on up.
I once interviewed for a PM job at Pivotal.
Uh-oh.
No,
Hopefully it wasn't Tracker.
No, it wasn't Tracker. It was in Santa Monica. But as part of the interview process, they gave me an assignment to research and come up with a plan for some features for Pivotal Tracker. So I was sort of curious, like does that ever actually go to you, or Because that sounded kind of fascinating to me. Thousands of people are pitching approaches for Pivotal Tracker.
It's true, and so I always forget that they do that, right? They being like Pivotal Labs or whoever's interviewing PMs. And once I was, actually, it was a few of us actually. We were in our Toronto office we were just there for some customer visits and stuff. And like I'm walking down the hall and I see like on a table like this printout, and it was like a stapled. Basically a presentation, right? But it was printed out, and the title was something like, I don't know, Pivotal Tracker and Enterprise Adoption, right? First of all, we have no Pivotal Tracker people in the Toronto office. So I'm like, what? This is my product. What is this doing here, right? Like, is somebody taking my product away? Like, is there something going on that I should be aware of, right? I'm start flipping through this, and my heart starts beating like, Jesus Christ, like we've been kind of talking about this, but how did this end up? How did this happen, right? What is this? Is this some secret plan from like my boss that I wasn't aware of, right? And then I'm like, oh yeah, the PM interviews, right? So the answer is no. It doesn't come to us. I don't know why, because I think we could probably benefit from this. So this is a good reminder. We're going to go out there and find them, and because I think there's some good ideas there. And I think it was more like, yeah, I'm sure. So, no, but more seriously, I think there is some bias by the HR and recruiting team to like not do that, because then you're essentially like you're doing spec work for free, right? Like, great, we just got 2 hours or maybe more, because some people spent like literally like a day and a half on it at home, right, as homework. We don't want to sort of frame that as something that we're going to take and then take these ideas and bring them to life. So, but that's a great question.
Any other questions in the audience? Yeah, come on.
Jim mentioned when he spoke that he was attempting to guard sort of the mission charter of Product Plan, that he received a lot of requests for project management sort of features and things like that. And you're in a different space. And I was thinking that, like in the startup space, that role is like Scrum Master, Product Owner, Project Manager. It's often the same person. So I'd be curious to hear your lens on that, and features for the people that need all three of those things, or whatever that means to you.
Sure. I mean, I'll try and interpret that as from the perspective of like what our product should be versus what it shouldn't be, right? And how can it support somebody in that role, right, when the scope of the work isn't so clearly defined, right? Does that sort of resonate a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. So I think much like Jim, right, we've had some challenges over the years, like trying to sort of maintain that, like, what is the scope of what this product should be and what should it not be, right? And I'm not sure that we've been thinking about the scope in terms of the roles, like project manager versus product manager. Like, we think more the team, right? A team working together, breaking things down, slicing, feeding themselves, really, right, with that backlog of fine-grained stories, and then working together to like get those stories to the finish line, right? And so our kind of product vision is more about, we want to support that. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be for software. It doesn't have to be for a project manager, but not a product manager. It's like, whatever. Sometimes you have one, sometimes you have another. In fact, project managers are maybe less of a thing for us, right? Because if you can create these sort of self-organizing, collectively owning, product-driven, cross-functional teams, like, you don't really have a project manager, or it's like, that's done as a process of what you do, right? Like by everyone on the team, but in particular the product manager, right? But the product manager is more like breaking things down. They're feeding Tracker with these bite-sized stories. And so for us, it's more about like, we want to support that way of working, right? We don't want to be a tool that allows, I don't know, like evil managers to like boss around their like underlings individually, in compartmentalized, siloed situations. Like, that's not the kind of product we want to be, right? We get a lot of requests for like, well, dependencies is one, and we're actually adding a certain sort of flavor of that we think fits the vision. But the other one that we get, as an example, so we have like these analytics in Tracker, right, where you can kind of go like look at some trends and what's kind of slowing, where you've been bottlenecking, cycle time, things like that. The number one request we get all the time is like, yeah, but can I have per developer productivity reports, please? Okay, I mean, we have all the data. We have a ton of fine-grained data. We can pull out anything, right? But the answer is just no. Okay, we're not going to give you that because, well, what we usually say is like, well, why do you need that, right? Well, because I want to understand which are my highest performing and lowest performing, individual contributors, right? It's like, well, why do you need to know that? I mean, obviously, like that's a real thing. Like sometimes, yeah, you just have people that suck, but like if you organize into teams working together, like it becomes super obvious like who's not pulling their weight. If you pair, right? Because like that's part of our vision. Like we should encourage more pairing. It becomes really obvious who's not pulling their weight, and we also don't want to promote the idea of the top contributor, the superstar, the cowboy. So we just don't want to make our product support that, but we will support team level metrics and productivity and trends because we want to help the team solve their problems as a team rather than one person managing a bunch of individuals. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how I see the sort of what should the product be and what it shouldn't be. It's more about, is it a team thing? Does it help with visibility, right? Does it help with focus, right? Versus the individual roles.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, look, I could keep going. Yeah.
I have one last question for you, Godfather.
Uh-oh. This is the secret question that you didn't share in advance.
Yeah, that's right. I always do that. I always say, I'll
No.
send you the questions, and then I ask the different ones. How does Pivotal Tracker differentiate itself in a marketplace that now does have, I mean, you mentioned Jira sort of being around, and of course there are others. So why Pivotal Tracker, in your opinion, as head of product?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the market is pretty crowded. I mean, like when we began, it was very different. Today, Jira is like everywhere and does everything for everyone, right? Trello is also like, yeah, you could just put everything in a list and move things around, and it's cool. Except now that's part of Jira, if you haven't heard. So it's a very crowded space, and every sort of every tool / product in the space has a niche. And I think ours, which kind of what I've been talking about already, right? Like for us, it's more about we want to support the specific situation of these small cross-functional teams working together, right? Like literally together pushing these stories from prioritized to, accepted and shipped, right? And having that shared visibility, the shared focus, rather than supporting like everything under the sun where you have like work being sort of like pushed from a person or role to another person / role to another group to another department, right? With this like this complicated web and workflows, like we don't even understand how that works, right? We don't know how people could possibly get anything done with these like webs of, connections as the work needs to traverse through all of them. And Kanban in particular, right? Like it's interesting. Kanban has a lot of benefits, right? And I think it's really great at like visualizing and identifying bottlenecks, right? And just kind of making everything sort of flow. But it also was built to support manufacturing where the sort of work artifact or the thing that you're building is literally moving from one node to another node to another node. And so you had to be really efficient at eliminating these bottlenecks at every step because they would back up, right? It would cause all kinds of inefficiency. So I sort of see the world as actually we don't, like if you're building software, like there's so much complexity around the communication, right? There's so many assumptions that you're making, right? There's so many decisions that constantly have to be made. Like you don't achieve the best results by pushing the work from one node / person / role to another. No. You come together as a team and you literally like work, you move that work artifact, that story from start to finish together, right? With everybody's hands on it, not too many hands, but just the right number of hands, right? And so it's like our product, I want our product to support that way of working and do it really well and maintain simplicity and make it so that like you see everything that's going on one page, right? So there are some aspects of the product that we want to retain that we sort of captured as our product must do this and it cannot do that. But that's the vision. And maybe, some tools, some other products will do some of that. But for us, like that's the singular focus, right? Supporting the cross-functional small team, collaborating together to ship and keep shipping.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.